curriculum development. Last webinar, which was in October, we discussed the role of pedagogy in early childhood education. And in this webinar, we'll be sharing valuable insights on the importance of STEM in education policy and curriculum. So please tell us your name, where you're joining in from, and what you hope to learn from today's webinar. And just going to briefly introduce the NICE community to us. So NICE stands for National Innovation for Education. NICE is a community of education innovators committed to increasing access to quality education for all children. It's created by TEP Center, and NICE currently engages the following channels. If you check the chat box, someone is going to be putting some of these links in the chat box. So we have our monthly newsletter, our podcast, education unscripted. I don't know if anyone has heard about that, but we have our podcast, education unscripted. Then we have virtual and in-person meetups, and the innovation webinar series like today's event. This webinar series has explored themes highlighted in previous edition of NEDIS. To collaborate with us on this webinar, please send an email to nice@TEP. And then we also have our event. The event designed to collaborate and synergize for the strengthening access to quality education using this platform, EdMeet Foundational Learning, and in the near future, the NICE Innovation Summit, NEDIS, which is it was established to facilitate continuous learning and was held in October into the panel discussion, where he also introduced maybe Signify. Okay.
Hi, Mr. Hi. Hello. You were breaking up, so I wasn't sure if you were actually referring to me.
Oh.
But I guess you are. Really nice to meet you. Really nice to meet everyone. Hello. We are here today to discuss the integration of STEM in education policy and curriculum development. And it's a really interesting topic, and I'm looking forward to the conversation we get to have with the panelists and as well as the participants too. STEM is, as I see it, is the answers. Or a way to answer the challenges of the 21st century. You know, a way to develop students who are not only smart cognitively, but also are skilled and have the abilities to think critically, to be innovative, to be creative, logical, productive, and to stay in touch with the realities of the world of work. And these skills, present a gap in our current workspace, and also present an opportunity to develop students who can have them in the future world of work. But then the question still remains is, how do we build up? How do we create systems? How do we integrate this science, technology, engineering, and mathematics in our curriculum, in our policy, to be able to succeed at developing the students in the future, to be able to access this technical skills, but also this human skills of creativity, collaboration, and critical thinking, and so on. And to unravel these big questions, I'm going to be having with me today three phenomenal speakers. We'll take this first hour to actually discuss the big question, and hopefully have 20 minutes at the end to have some questions and answers from the audience. And I would love to quickly introduce my speakers today. First, I have, just give me a minute. First, I have Oluwaseun Kayode. Is the CEO of Schoolinka, an edtech company utilizing technology to create a community of highly skilled educators for African schools. He is also a key voice in conversations surrounding the improvement of teacher quality on the continent. And secondly, I have Moses Olayemi, who is an assistant professor of engineering pathways at the University of Oklahoma. His research focuses on enhancing STEM education in resource-limited context, with a special emphasis on culturally relevant pedagogy and the adaptation of measurement instruments, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa. And lastly, we have Chidubem, who is a product manager at ULesson, an edtech company as well, prepping people for opportunity and improving society through education. Chidubem is also passionate about fusing technology into education as a concept and tool for learning. Welcome to our speakers.
Hi, Harry.
Thank you.
Hi, Chidubem.
Glad to be here.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Very good to be here.
Welcome, Sharon. Can we spotlight our speakers before we go on? Okay, so I'm not sure if we have all our speakers here, because I can't seem to find Moses. Okay, doesn't seem like Moses.
Yes, I think Olayemi is yet to join. I'm just going to follow up with him. He will join in shortly.
All right. Okay. So seems like we would start off with Chidubem and Sharon. And Chidubem, I would like to begin the question with you. I would have loved Moses to be here, since he's doing research in STEM to give us some sort of introduction to what STEM actually means. But at the same time, we can also begin from you to hear what you think is the meaning of STEM education. And this is considering the fact that you work, in one of the leading tech companies in Nigeria. You are in touch with what teachers need, what students need, and in touch with the gaps in the industry as well. Taking this perspective, I would love for you to please share what STEM means from your perspective.
Okay, yeah. Thanks, Henry. Thanks, everybody. Glad to be here. So basically, like STEM is the integration of, the four subjects, clearly as the name implies: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, in a cohesive and interdisciplinary format to achieve the applied learning approaches. So basically, STEM would be more than the theoretical concept of education. So it's about equipping students with life applicable teachings that helps them to go ahead and solve real world problems, right? The idea of education, in some circles, is now being moved to STEAM, where an A is added between the E and the M, adding arts and commercials into it. But the idea of STEM holistically is to be able to give students the ability to think and solve problems in an innovative way, right? Education is there to help us better society. That's what it's been doing all through. We believe that education is actually drawing from what is already in the individual, drawing it out, empowering the individual to go out there and, solve problems. So basically for us at ULESN and me personally, I think that STEM is an emphasis on skills rather than just theoretical knowledge, right? To be able to really use what we've learned in our classrooms to solve real life situations that we face in our farms, in our families, on the street, in our economy and all. So for us at ULESN and as well as myself, that's what STEM is, basically, to be able to empower students across this four concepts, educationally, to be innovative and be able to solve real life problems.
Thanks a lot, Chidubem. I really love that definition, and I think it encompasses both like the technical aspects of mathematics, engineering, technology, and also brings into play the skills actually that are needed to thrive. And I really loved how you mentioned, that STEM is an emphasis on skills rather than theory. It's about the ability to think, solve problems, create better societies as well. And, I would love to stay with you for a bit here and let's talk about the world of work, right? It's, I don't know if you would agree with me that these are some of the things that are actually missing in our workforce right now. And I know you experience that in some ways in maybe recruitment and so on. And I would love to ask, for students, young students, or who are currently, in school, going through the process, whether secondary school or university, what are some of the things you think they should prioritize when, finishing their education?
Okay, thank you for that. I'd like to say that unfortunately, it shouldn't be left to the students. We shouldn't be having this conversation of what the secondary student, school student should be focusing on, unfortunately, because at that stage in life, as much as we would like to not emphasize it, people have not really figured out what they want to do, who they are, right? So there's still a gap between what government should be doing, what the society should be doing to prepare these young ones for the future. But we'll have to. Innovation. They say that necessity is the mother of innovation. So, given the circle where we are in, for young people, I think number one is that they should be open to digital literacy. Obviously, is the generation we are born into, right? You just have to be open to digital literacy because if you don't, the world is going to move very fast, and you might, be on a catch-up race. So, digital literacy. An emphasis on the ability to use the internet and digital devices, right? We see graduates who are leaving schools and having to still go and learn how to use the computer, right? I mean, 30 years back, the flex was being able to use the typewriter and the speed of typing. But today, even when you're applying for jobs, companies see it as a foregone conclusion that you are digitally literate. So you're no longer going to put on your CV that you can use Microsoft Excel as a flex, right? It's a given. So I think that that's some of the things that students should pay attention to. Being digitally literate. I think if you are digitally literate, you can pretty much pick up every other thing because the world is on the internet. And also there's emphasis on soft skills like communication, right? Being able to tell your story, both written and oral. That's very, very important in today's world, especially with social media and all. There is a thing in tech where there is emphasis for you to learn in public, right? Share what you're learning. And, people can be able to correct you. You can, be open to opportunities over there. You have to learn how to communicate. Obviously, there are things like critical thinking, being able to just think about what you're learning in school. How does it apply to your everyday life? I mean, the truth of the matter is that sometimes in classes, teachers, for no fault of theirs, might not be able to attribute what concepts we are learning in school and how it applies to everyday life. But it's not left for the students to be able to try and do that. It helps you deepen your understanding of that concept. And when you come into the real workspace, you can be able to tie them into what you're having to do in school. So I think the emphasis should be digital literacy, core technical digital literacy, and then soft skills. And then just to wrap it up, I think, leadership as well, right? Being able to lead yourself and as well as, being able to collaborate and lead others, right? Emphasis in the future of work, I mean, with remote working, hybrid working and all, and it's going to be something that is going to be there. There is need for us to learn how to collaborate across cultures, across personality, and just being able to have that. I think that's what we make any student exemplary and being able to fit into the future we are envisaging.
Thanks. Again, the skills, the outline you've made here is, I agree 100% with them, and even more with how you started the conversation in terms of saying that we shouldn't actually be talking about what students can do, right? We should actually be holding governments responsible. We should be holding governments and systems responsible for how we create a path where students can be able to develop these skills. And thanks again, Chidubem, for that. And on that note, I would love to move to Seun. Can we spotlight him, please? Thanks. Seun, I know you've been listening to this conversation,
Yeah.
having just now with Chidubem, and I really love the note on how, he said, just considering we shouldn't be, just focused on students, right? And this is not what this conversation is about, right? It's about, curriculum and policy. So I would love to move that to you, that question of what the system in that sense can do to create the possibilities for students to build these skills. And you are very much in touch with teachers. You develop, you create opportunities for teachers to be able to develop themselves. And the question now to you is, how do we support teachers within the classroom to ensure the effective development of STEM skills in our students?
Thank you so much, Harry. Apologies about the background. I'm currently joining from a car because of how my day is anyway. But I hope you can hear me well and clearly.
Yes, right. I can hear you very well. Yes.
All right, good. Thank you so much. I think Chidubem has spoken a whole lot. And I also like his perspective of we actually, holding the government accountable, holding other players in the ecosystem accountable for STEM development and for children building, the future of work skills. And for me, speaking from the angle of, the teachers as well, as to what teachers really need to be able to train their students in STEM related areas. First, I want to even first say that, of course, Chidubem did a great definition of STEM. But for me personally as well, I also see STEM beyond the subject. I see it as a learning approach. I see it as a teaching and learning approach rather. Because I think that, the fusion of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics just form a whole spectrum by which students and teachers can actually view learning or can actually go through learning experience together. Talk about science, which has to do with inquiry, asking questions. These are things that you don't only use in science. You can use it even in Yoruba language subject, right? So these are like, so it's sort of like an approach. Talk about engineering, talks about design, talk about technology, talking about tools, mathematics. Like you can always relate these things to other subjects, right? And I think that it's important that we also know that STEM is not only for folks in the science-related fields. This is something that everybody should actually embrace. So in terms of, how we can support teachers within the classroom to ensure effective development of STEM skills, in our students. I think one, I'm going to talk from my own background, right, or from the area which I work, which is professional development. I'm very big on professional development. I also believe in the very simple statement that says you can't give what you don't have, right? So if you have teachers in schools and they don't even know what STEM is, you can't expect them to teach what they don't know to the students. So I think professional development is the major way we can support teachers, right? Teachers need ongoing professional development opportunities to be able to stay updated, on the latest STEM advancements and teaching methodologies, right? And this has to do with, there are different ways by which this can happen. It can happen through webinars, just like we're having here right now. People can hang on to a Zoom call just to learn more about STEM. So I think that area is really lacking. There are a lot of organizations doing a lot of seminars and webinars and workshops in the area of STEM. But, if you dig deep, sometimes you find out that there are some other gaps that are existing in that. One is scale. Some of these organizations are not able to scale the STEM training that they're doing, and they're only able to reach a handful of educators. There's also the part of inclusivity and accessibility. There are a lot of educators who live and work in remote communities, and they're not able to attend STEM training programs that usually happen in the cities and happen in hybrid school areas. So what that means is the fact that you're kind of disenfranchising students from this kind of communities from accessing this kind of, accessing STEM, really STEM education. So I think professional development is key. We need to learn how we can basically just help, we need to learn how we can, basically create a system that will help scale training for, for STEM, right? And then of course, another big thing is access to resources. Of course, we know that STEM is not only about resources. When you say STEM, most times people just say, oh, the STEM kits, the robotics and all of these things, right? But it's beyond that. It's beyond the robotics and all the kits that they bring together. STEM is beyond that. However, you can't remove resources from STEM, from, real and good and quality STEM education. Resources are very, very important, right? So how can we make resources available to teachers, right? How do we ensure that teachers have access to the necessary tools, necessary, laboratory equipment and technology that is essential to deliver high quality STEM education? And this can be achieved through, public-private partnerships, partnership with educational institutions, partnership with private sector, with government initiatives, right? So there has to be like a lot of people coming together to ensure that this is happening. Another thing is the integration of technology, right? Of course, technology is already part of STEM in a way in its definition. So how are we able to leverage on technology to create a community of practice first, to bring educators from different places together who are very passionate about STEM and bringing them together. And of course, apart from just building that community of practice, how can we bring tech into the classroom, right? And also providing teachers with training, like I'm going back to professional development as well, on how to effectively use these educational technology tools, that can significantly impact the student engagement in STEM education. And I think one thing, which is why I also mentioned the definition I mentioned at first, inquiry-based learning. I think this is something that we need to encourage strongly for teachers and also for students. But first for teachers, I've worked with over 5,000 teachers, right? And then I've, got a sense of how many teachers think about the work. There are a lot of educators doing fantastic work, but we also have a critical mass of educators who don't go a step ahead to, kind of conduct inquiries into how they teach, what they're teaching, if even come back to reflect on the experience of teaching in the first place, which begs another level of inquiry. So how can we help educators move from just downloading the curriculum and uploading to the student's brain to actually getting into inquiry-based learning by them also asking questions, raising questions. And when we are able to get educators to, be able to implement inquiry-based learning in their own teaching practice, what we are going to see is that would translate to the students. And you see students also, catching that, a mindset of inquiry-based learning. And, the reason why I mentioned inquiry-based learning is because for STEM education to be effective, you can't do it outside of inquiry-based learning. It's not possible, right? So because science has to do with asking questions. So how can we promote inquiry-based learning in teaching practice for teachers? And I'll just quickly mention collaboration and networking. Very important, right? So this kind of conversations we are having, how can we create a community of practice that, educators come together, they talk about STEM, they talk about STEM-related issues, people are sharing their inspiring stories of how STEM have been deployed in their classrooms, people are sharing their challenges and asking questions from other people who have done this, right? There's a whole lot of learning that can happen through communities of practice, right? I think it's important that we have, anybody working with teachers should endeavor to create this kind of communities and this kind of spaces for educators to collaborate with one another, share learning experiences. And final thing I will also say is, because I feel like, when you want to see change up, and I used to say this a lot of times, right? So you need the local actors, or let me say the actors in that field, and the actors in this place that's the teachers, right? The teachers who are actually going to start implementing STEM in their classrooms. You need the community, and that's the community of practice that I spoke about. Then you need the stories of what is possible, and that is where my last point will come into play, right? So how can we recognize, identify, reward, and celebrate educators who are actually implementing STEM-based education, right? How can we bring them out and celebrate them so that they can inspire other people to take actions, right? There was a time when it was technology in education, educators who are using the tech tools, it's still the wave of the moment, by the way, right? But of course, at that time, what that did was the fact that you had a lot of educators, we had a lot of educators now wanting to come into tech education, right? So let us bring technology into education, right? Let us start using tech tools, and that's because they were being celebrated, and everybody wants to be part of that. There's something called social reputation. If you can attach social reputation to the teaching of STEM in classrooms, you see many educators being inspired and motivated to want to be part of it. So these are like areas or ways I think we can really support teachers to implement STEM in their classroom and also guide their students in this space. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. That was very insightful, and I think you actually changed a lot of the way I think about this when you were explaining, when you were really tackling the question. And one of them is that it's STEM as basically a way of learning that is not to be relegated to just science subjects. And you go on to, kind of explain, whether it's tech integration, professional development, problem-based learning, and so on. And I see how that is not just a tool that is, just for science subject, and as you said, can be implemented in other areas,
Exactly.
Agriculture, languages, just any subject at all.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it's I think that one of the important things, it's the skills, right? That the students go out with. And as Chibikon has said already, STEM is actually skills development.
Yeah.
And just to still stay with you for a while, Sheon, one of you mentioned like one of the critical things, right, we need to look at is skill, right? How do we scale the professional development of teachers? And an interesting concept you brought up is also this attaching the social reputation to STEM. I think that's so interesting. And that's that's probably a whole other topic. But just to to drill deep on this concept of collaboration, how can private partners, right, and that is like School-Inca, like ULesson, collaborate with education ministries and agencies to strengthen STEM education, or to implement some of these ideas you've both been sharing so far?
Yeah, I think, there are a lot of ways that private sector can come into STEM. In fact, I feel like STEM should really be driven and spearheaded by the private sector. And that's because when you look at STEM, Chidubem said it, when he was talking about the future of work skills. When you look at STEM is basically preparing students to fit into the workplace. And so where's the workplace? I don't have data for that, but where you find workspaces most is in the private sector, right? So, and I think that when it comes to building a pipeline of talent for workforce, for private sector workforce, the private sector themselves should be heavily invested in that process. And that has to do with education generally, but particularly STEM education. And that's where, of course, there's a popular, statement we make and say public-private partnerships, PPP. We throw that thing around, like PPP should happen, right? So, but of course, this is not me trading around this time, but this is me saying this is very important and integral to the process of, ensuring that, private sectors are brought into this work, right? And I think it's not only on the part of the private sector themselves, and this is just me to be fair, right? I think the question really is, how open is government? So PPP in the first place. Are governments not only just giving contracts or working with educators or working with private sector people that they know or belongs to their political tribe? How does politics influence the decisions of PPP when it comes to STEM education, right? Because I feel like one reason why a lot of private sector people have shy away from working with government is because of this nepotism and all of these things, right? That happens within the government sector. So how open is the government in terms of welcoming ideas and initiatives brought by private sector? I think it starts from there. Then it also comes to the private sector themselves. How willing are they to actually contribute to actually improving STEM education in Nigeria and Africa? And this collaboration really can involve financial support. It can involve resource sharing. It can be around development of mutually beneficial programs, so to say, between the private sector and the public sector. It can be things that, of course, will still benefit the private sector after all, right? So I think public-private, partnership is very, very important. One other area that I think private sector can come into is curriculum development, right? There's a big saying that we have that, the real world application of whatever it is we learn in school today is close to zero, right? I was talking and I was discussing with someone and I was like, oh, in my school, I learned shorthand in business studies. And people are like, oh, shorthand, they're still learning shorthand in business studies, even till date, right? So I'm like, you can't even apply that to anything right now. I think it is also same right now. So STEM education, if you go to many places, is just, students coming together and bring battery and wire and bulbs together to put up light, which is beautiful, by the way. Of course, these are fundamentals. But when you go to the workplace, how is that useful, right? How can private sector guys come together with the government, with the guys working in the classroom, with the students, to form like a round table and discuss curriculum and say, this is what we think is applicable in real world, in real life application. And so how can we convert this into subjects or topics that can be brought into the curriculum as far as STEM education is concerned? So I think curriculum development should not be solely done by some people in the policy-making offices, but it should be done with inclusion of private sectors, right? They should contribute to the development of STEM curricula, that align with industry needs. And I'll emphasize that industry needs, right? Because that's what makes sense. This big part, money is very important. Private sector should sponsor educational programs that actually, are focused on STEM, right? And this can be, just like I said, for instance, I mentioned, the social capital, social reputation thing, recognizing and celebrating educators. There's a program I love currently, which is a Multinational Teacher of the Year, right? They've been doing it consistently over the years. And you see educators strive to want to be the Multinational Teacher of the Year every year. And that also inspires their performance and productivity in the classroom. So how can private sector also come up and say, let's establish a competition or a workshop that really recognizes these guys and celebrate them, right? So I think sponsorship of educational programs that are focused on STEM is very important. Teacher training and professional development. Let them bring the money to schooling and let's train more teachers, you know. Right. So let us look for these organizations that are doing work in STEM related fields and support them, right? Especially those who are focused on teacher training in the area of STEM. One beautiful part that I love, and this is an idea I've been working on for some time now, is, you know, around how do we give early career exposure to students through internships, right? How can we get students as well be involved in internships, right? That, you know, that in STEM related areas, and these are areas where private sector can basically come in and, you know, talk about infrastructure development, talk about data sharing, talk about research and evaluation. These are places where, you know, these guys can contribute their quota in. For instance, having like maybe an organization like Accenture or BCG come to say we want to conduct a research in Nigerian classrooms on how, you know, STEM is improving, you know, educational outcomes, or is it contributing to, you know, talent development for the workforce. Those kind of research is very expensive and it require expertise, and these expertise are usually seated in private sector's offices. So how can we bring these guys to dedicate, for instance, 5 hours of their time every week over the course of 2 years to conduct this kind of research? I believe that this kind of research, once it is out, the body of knowledge that is generated will be brought back into the space to continually improve how we, you know, deliver STEM education. So these are like different ways that private sectors can really play roles in ensuring that STEM education is promoted and is, you know, effectively delivered.
Thanks a lot, Sean. You know, I really appreciate your response to that question on how we can encourage this. And just off the back of that, I would love to, you know, ask so far we've been discussing learning, discussing best practices and resources, and how we can share resources to integrate, you know, STEM in our everyday practices, in curriculum, in policy. And I would love to, you know, ask Chidubem this question. How can education policies really encourage partnerships between governments and, you know, private institutions and, you know, even non-profit organizations to promote, you know, conversations like this, or to promote the sharing of best practices? And in my mind, your organization, ULESSON, you know, one of the leading edtech companies, kind of which has achieved scale to an extent, would actually, you know, has achieved this success in a way because of a close conversation with, you know, with government and also with communities. So considering this context, how do you think education policy can encourage these partnerships?
Yeah, thanks, Henry, and thanks, Oluwaseun. I mean, that was really insightful. So, basically, right, I agree totally with what Oluwaseun was saying in terms of what private sector can do, right? But I feel like a lot of the bulk still rests on the government table, right? Because they are the arbiters, right? They create the framework for which everybody would be able to operate in, right? So, so think of government as the people who would call the required people inside the same room and say, figure this out, right? And make sure that the room is lit, the AC is functioning, the whiteboard is there, right? So they might not necessarily be able to fund it or to even bring in the expertise, but they need to be the ones to start the conversation, right? In the context of ULESSON, obviously, we've obviously gotten having to be in conversation with government, right? But it's at great cost to businesses, right? Because there is a general pushback. There are no partners that are excited on that side for that, you know, handshake that is required between the government and the private sector, right? So, Oluwaseun mentioned about, like, you know, a lot of PPP and private companies coming into, and it's not even edtech companies, right? But let's talk about edtech companies. So, for people in the edtech space, what are the incentives that these people are getting? As much as that we are a profit for business, we are also solving a social problem, right? That has social advantage to the society. So there should be incentives that, you know, improve or encourage people to get into the edtech space, because I mean startups are very capital intensive, especially here in societies like ours, where you have to pay for talent, you have to pay a lot of other bills, right? So there should be incentives. I think that's where governments are coming, creating a framework that allows for collaboration, things like incentives that enables businesses to be able to get into the education space. We know about CSRs, right? So what will a company get for investing in things like healthcare and education? Things that don't just benefit them directly, but also kind of help society solve our problems. So I think basically what government can do is to create a framework that enables these collaborations, with objectives, key milestones that are measurable. So they are not just going to be an all-commerce affair where everybody comes to play. But if you're, for instance, in the edtech space and you are doing these numbers, you are having this impact, there should be some initiatives that allows you to scale. ULesson has scaled, but I must tell you that we've not even scratched the surface in terms of what we need to do to get this into the right hands. I mean, ULesson are in some states and we're not even known there, right? And these are states where these things are really needed, right? Talk about in the far north or where the insurgency and all are happening. You can get technology into those places because there are infrastructures that ULesson will have to depend on, cellular data and all things like that. These are not available there. And there's little that edtech companies can do on those areas. If you go to the West, like in the US or in Europe, edtech is in the mainstream of regular education. Government heavily relies on edtech platforms to be able to educate their population, right? But here, it's more seen as like a business venture, as much as it's for profit, but government has to see it as a partner in solving the educating problem. Obviously, government will not be able to educate our massive population. That's the truth. I mean, private universities, we're talking about, recently we launched an open university, completely online, right? And the traction has been massive because there is a need there, right? You think about what things like Netford are doing, and all. There's a need there. So government has to see these companies as a partner in development, as much as they are making profit, but that profit is negligible when it comes to the impact they are making on the society. So government has to be innovative in making sure that collaboration with this, these companies are also incentivized. Number one, it makes the already players to be stronger and also invites new players into the space because obviously the pie is quite large for everyone to take a bite. And at the end, we're obviously preparing our future. So that's what I think government can do, providing a policy framework for any kind of collaboration that also shows that they are willing to make it, very, things like grants, tax breaks, and like, Oluwaseun mentioned, recognitions, right? That, makes it sensible for people to invest their money in education generally.
Thanks a lot, Chidubem. And I think, this is all spot on. But a question that came to mind for me as you were, sharing this is, first you talked about, government seeing private sector as partner in development and creating the framework for collaboration. And I wonder what has been, the biggest limitation when it comes to working with government to achieve these development goals, and how have you been able to surmount that?
Well, I think that like the biggest will be lack of, will I say, willingness from key players in government to be able to partner. The truth is that obviously there are obviously outliers within government who sees the big picture, right? But there is no laid down policy that enforces that collaboration. So I will be, you get a sense of a lackadaisical attitude. You get the sense of an unwillingness to try new things, right? Obviously, that could be down to lack of also adequate knowledge in terms of that, okay, edtech is coming as as a partner. Just to mention, for instance, what Oluwaseun is doing with, teaching teachers and all. Teachers are an important key player and stakeholder when it comes to, education generally, and even what EdTech will do in the future. But there is a perceived fear among teachers that EdTech is coming to take their jobs, right? So when things like ULesson come into schools, there's pushback, even in private schools who have policies to bring in education into their curriculum. There's still pushback among their teachers in using things like ULesson and other tech products, right? Now, not to think of like, government schools where probably there is no laid down policies to bring these things into. So I think that obviously it's a lack of awareness of the world around us. Key players not being able to be open to new things. So that's been the major push. But obviously, given that we are a startup and just the vigor of trying to push things through, if you try hard, you will find one or two outliers within even government who are willing to, take the risk and partner with you, who sees the future, just like the way, entrepreneurs will see. So I think that, that's basically it. There's a misconception, or will I say a lack of awareness of where the future is going largely, or if there is, we've not been able to police and chart a course towards which everyone in government is now willing, not just receiving collaborations, but even going out to seek out collaboration and invite collaboration in. So government will rarely invite collaboration in, right? And people will go for it, and there will still be initial pushbacks and all. So obviously there are some good news with what we are seeing with the startup bill and things like that, and we're hoping that could help. But initially, essentially, just to get the right people in government to be able to see things the way education is going in the future, and be able to be open to these collaborations, even if they wouldn't invite it, but at least make a soft landing spot for entrepreneurs to come into the space.
Thanks, Chidubem. And Seun, have you seen this same reality in your own work that Chidubem just described? And that is this unwillingness to partner and try new things, and just a kind of lack of awareness of where the direction the future is taken. And how has this manifested in your own experience, and how have you tried to navigate that as well?
Yeah, so I think one, I would say, Chidubem has already said a lot, and I agree with him on, everything. I echo his sentiment really. I think that, I think it's a cultural thing as well, where people are not open, to actually bringing somebody in on their own thing. Everybody just wants to do their own stuff and just think that the world is just like a competitive space where you either win or you go out of the game. But one thing we are seeing that is changing is the fact that collaboration is key. You really can't go far without collaboration. It's not possible for you to go far without collaboration. And I think this is one area we need to raise a lot of awareness when it comes to STEM, when it comes to education, EdTech generally, right? For instance, I was sharing at a conference, a few months ago, and I was saying that, for example, in EdTech now, there are a lot of products that are out there, a lot of products, just like it is in the fintech space as well. Like there are thousands of fintech products, basically doing the same thing. Or probably if we can match 100 of them together, they will basically be features of one single platform. And that's what is happening already in EdTech as well. Like you have people doing different things, and people are not willing to create collaborative points. And I think that it's important for us to create sort of like handshake processes and handshake gates where all of these innovations come together to collaborate with one another. I think it's important in STEM related fields, because looking at STEM education is quite expensive. And that's why when you see proper STEM education happening, you find it in high-growth schools. The ones that happen in low-income schools, most times are nothing to write home about. But when you go to high-growth schools, you see high-quality STEM education happening. And that's because they can afford it. And so if you have a value that it looks like not everybody can afford it, the only way you can scale that and increase accessibility is collaboration. There's really no other magic about it. So I think we need to raise awareness about collaboration when it comes to STEM education. And just like Chidubem said, like raise level of awareness to the point of how do we lobby, lawmakers, for instance, as well, to create a policy on STEM education, right? A policy that actually advances STEM education. How do we work with ministries of education? How do we work with edtech companies? How do we work with private initiatives as well? How do we bring everybody all together? How do we standardize content when it comes to STEM education? Right. So there are a lot of organizations. There's STEMnet in Nigeria. We have STEM labs. We have STEM cafe. Like there are a lot of STEM. But how do we bring everybody together, right, to ensure that we are able to create standardized content around all of these things, and we're also able to make sure procedures of delivery is seamless, right? So I think that collaboration is key. We need to raise that level of awareness. I feel like the issue around people not collaborating is real. And for me, right, the way I've been able to, navigate that, trust me, we're still in the process. We've had series of conversations with a lot of government officials, and while you're doing, is either they tell you, oh, government will not pay you, or you can come and do something for us, but we will not pay you. We don't have money. I'm like, okay, so where do you expect me to get the money to do what I'm going to do, right? Or you go to meet a funder, and the funder is telling you, I can't fund teacher training. I would rather fund building of classroom blocks because I can easily place my name on building blocks, but I can't place my name and pictures on teacher training, right? Because I mean, you can't really quantify, you can't see the physical structures when it comes to teacher training, right? So you have all those complexities where people are not able to fund long-term outcomes. They are more focused on funding short-term outcomes. They are more focused on funding things that they can objectify. But they're not able to invest, to see, okay, change happen over the long time. They're not willing to stay in the long haul, right? So these are like the complexities that I've come to, like really navigate in my work. I've had conversation as well with private institutions, and then, oh, come and, support this work that they're doing, but they're not really open, or they kind of show some level of commitment, and at some point they just break off. So I think if we can all see this as a general, or as an issue that everybody plays a part, in actually tackling, then we might have a sense of equity in it, right? And I always, state this for what I've read, about the Finland education or the Finnish education system. At some point, I mean, what I read was the fact that Finland was largely an agrarian nation, right? They don't really have much resources or money. But of course, they looked at every other countries around them and like, okay, this country has this country has that, this country is, big on this. What is it that can, what can we double down on as a nation to, sort of develop something like a comparative advantage for us? And they said education it is for them. So education now became a political will and a social will. So everybody in the country, okay, yes, let's work on developing an education system. And what do we have today? If you're looking for the best education systems in the world, you count Finland as one of them, right? And so this is like, so if we can create that national, or let me say Pan-African sensitization, where everybody see themselves as part of this issue or part of the problem and part of the solution as well, we might be able to increase the rate of collaboration and thereby also advance, STEM education.
I think there was one a research paper, I think, released by RISE a couple of years ago, maybe 2 years, not too long ago. And one of the points they were making is that for us to be able to progress in education, I think any context, is we all have to agree on the purpose of education, right? And I think that's something you are pointing to here with, this Finnish education, is we all have to come together and agree what education is for, right?
Yes.
And yes. I think it may seem, and I know we would all agree with this, is like different people actually have, different reasons on what education is for. For the, for someone maybe somewhere in a government office, education is for, maybe some sort of means to an end. It's places for political appointments, for the private sector person trying to create solutions. It's a way to create students who can contribute to society. It's a way to build the future of the country. So I think at the end of the day, is how do we come together to agree that this is what education is for and work together towards that purpose. Because sometimes it can be like different, we are working towards totally different purposes. And there's something you were mentioning here, Sheon, and it was making me think, and I think in the comment as well, Jadeshola has put in something on how, colleagues are sometimes suspicious of collaborations. And it's making me think that how can we give what we don't have, right? As product of an old system, it seems we are kept in charge of creating these new systems, right? We were built from our education system to have like this competitive, mindset. And here we are being told to create a new system that is that promotes collaboration, right? But at the same time, the very people who are charged with creating a collaborative environment is very suspicious of collaboration themselves. So it's how do we begin this process of deconstructing, this is teachers themselves, even us as private sector, us as leaders in nonprofit. How do we ourselves begin this process of deconstructing what we have gotten from our own education system in order to build something new for students and for the future?
And I think also, just to jump in, I think it has to do with a lot of, just like you said, this deconstruction of mindsets, really. And I'm also going to link this back to our perceived importance, or let me say, our perception or the perception of value we place on education and education industry as a whole, and the people who work in education. How do we see ourselves? Do we see ourselves as an important piece of the puzzle of this nation or of this continent, Africa? Do we think education is very, very, very important? And do we think we that are working in education have a voice that needs to be heard? Right? And this is a challenge, right? I speak with teachers and teachers come to me and tell me, oh, we've learned this beautiful thing from School Inca right now, but when we get to our schools, our head of school will tell us this is how we should do it. And the question I'm always asking is, were you able to, even speak to your head of school and advocate for this process and advocate for the result that you've seen? And most of them are like, oh, they can't, right? So, and that's because that comes to like the mindsets that exists currently in our schooling and education system, where everybody thinks that education is just one thing, it's just one social good that someone needs to beg for, or someone needs to just relegate to a particular position. And I think it's just the way we see things, right? How can educators, teachers themselves see their profession as standard as that of the medical profession or the engineering profession, right? And this is something that the tech guys did, right? Right now, when you see someone say, I work in tech, they're like the big guys, they're like the big boys. Many years ago, it was the oil industry, right? It was the oil and gas. But there was this change or this mindset reorientation that happened in recent times. And it came from the people in that industry basically advocating for themselves. So for us in education, how do we amplify our own voices to let people know how education connects to real development in Nigeria and Africa, and how we are important in that process, and why people should begin to take us serious? So I think it starts from here, right? Like you said, we might not even have to wait for the government. At the end of the day, the government usually bends to the will of the people, right? I mean, of course, there's a popular notion that maybe it doesn't happen, but that happens. If the will of the people is very strong, the government will have to bend to it. If the will of the people is strong, the private sector, because private sector serves the people, they will have to bend to that will. You can imagine a situation where private sectors know that, oh, if you don't fund STEM education, for instance, people will not take your product serious. That's one way, and it has to do with we ourselves, placing real value on what we're doing and not being afraid, and always be open to always speaking up and advocating for this, advocating for what we want to see in education and what we want to see in STEM education.
Thanks, Sean. There is, just in line with what you were just, sharing now, there is a question in the comment box that asks, would an association of STEM practitioners be a formidable force to lobby government and policy changes? Chidubem, I would, love to hear your take on this, or if, you have any inputs to make on, what we were just talking about in terms of, how product of an old system can create a new system, because it seems, that is the issue we're seeing, right? Where teachers, right, or people in charge of creating this new system are actually, scared of or wary of collaboration and so on. So these are like two questions. If you have any comment on that, please go ahead, or you can go ahead and talk about how if an association of STEM practitioners can actually get government to make policy changes.
Yeah. So, well, obviously, like I believe that any kind of pressure group, just like Olusegun said, that obviously the will of the people, if strong and the convictions are there, has a way of directing government policies and even, what the private sector will do, like you rightly said. So I think that, players in the edtech space and, in the educational space are very important stakeholders, in the conversation of where education is going to go in the future. Here at ULESN, we have lots of teachers that we work with. At the core, what tech is actually enabling various, industries, right? So it's edtech. So as much as there are the software development in it, at the core is still education, right? So you can't do edtech without teachers. You can't do it without school administrators, right? So you can't do fintech without, core bankers who understand how the market works. So I think that any kind of pressure group, especially when there is coordination to put pressure, and obviously what we are asking for is clear, that can be able to engage government at all levels, right? And I'm saying this not just for at the federal level. I think there's a lot of things that even state governments can come in and do that can, move the needle positively for us, right? So even at state level, if we can come together and have pressure groups within people who work in STEM or, generally who are interested in STEM to be able to make advocate for certain requirements from government, even policies that ensure that CSR from private in the businesses are targeted towards education. I mean, for instance, if you look at the budget of how many states their budget have up to 10% in education, that's like something that we don't have. So these are some of the things we can begin to have civil society organizations that can start making demands for this, right? And engaging government, not just at the federal level, but also at the state level on how they can be able to prioritize education and STEM in particular. Obviously, because we know that STEM is no longer just sciences; it's about an approach to education that is result-oriented, right? So it's important that we have any form of civil society organizations that are coordinated. Obviously, Olusegun has said a lot about collaboration. There needs to be a lot of coordination because if you look, guys, like you feel like as if education is left at the back burner, like it's like a second thought for government. So if we are making noise in all sorts of places and it's not coordinated, it might not be loud enough. It might not make them lose sleep enough. So there needs to be coordination. The objectives has to be outlined to put this pressure on both government and civil society, on government and private establishment to be able to prioritize education. For instance, if government can come up with policies that say that, oh, as a business, if your CSR is verifiable and it's towards education, you get tax breaks, you get grants or things like that. That will also motivate private industries to invest in education, right? And give them guidelines on where to invest it and not just leave them open-ended, right? This is our target for so and so period of years. If we are trying to improve digital literacy or professional development for our teachers. So what are banks doing? What are FCMGs doing? What are they doing towards doing that? So government is able to measure that. Civil society is a player, being able to measure that as well. And those businesses can get grants from government or tax breaks from government because they are investing in education. So yeah, I'm all for that, and I'm sure that that's something that is going to also help generally. And just to give divert a bit, I think that a lot of what we can do in terms of education rides on other aspects of our society, right? So look at edtech. there is a drive for things like, learning over the internet, online learning and all. But, we are looking at things like the cost of data, internet penetration, right? These are still things that are hampering students from taking advantage of this, right? Schools are not able to get on the internet because lots of their learners do not have access to internet connectivity where they are, or Wi-Fi's and things like that. So if, for instance, you're a teacher trying to introduce STEM into your school and you're having that conversation with your principal, the principal is saying that, oh, half of our students are living in areas where they don't have internet connectivity. So whatever we are, implementing will not be able to, they can't take advantage of it largely. Or schools are thinking about the cost of internet connectivity in schools. That's one of the things we faced, getting schools as partners, right? So they are saying we can pay for ULesson, right? We can pay, we can set it up. But, the recurrent cost of funding internet connectivity, it's also a challenge for schools and all. So just to say that, there is, it's a lot that we can do, but we need everybody to be making the noise in a coordinated way so that the people who need to hear us will be able to hear us and, move the needle in the positive direction.
Thanks a lot, Chidubem and Sharon as well. And, Grace put it so well in the comment section where she says, advocating for intergenerational solidarity in policymaking. And from what you've been saying as well, I think we should also add and multi-sectoral solidarity as well in policymaking. Thank you so much. I would love to, just speak to the audience now and say, if you have any questions, please add to the Q&A or to the comment section, and I would see it and ask our speakers. If there are any questions, just put it there. I think we have one here already that says, how do we merge the need to make profits while also staying in sustainable conversations around collaboration? I know Sharon has been talking a lot about this in terms of managing the work he's doing and also the profit making. And how have you been able to work around this or to be able to merge these needs together, Sharon? Okay, I think maybe Sharon has dropped off. Chidubem, I wonder if this is something you have seen in your work at ULesson, and how have you been able to go both ways? I know you were just talking about areas where really no connectivity. How has that shown up, and how have you ULesson navigated that, the making an impact and the profit side of the business?
Yeah, so I think that there are areas generally when you're getting into business that you would obviously make up your mind that as much as you're for profit, but you just have to be in it for the long haul. Education is one of them, right? For you to be able to gain traction and to get your bottom line to the profit margin. Education is one of the places you don't just come in for a quick win. It has to be, you just have to be there for a long haul, because the investment and it's very capital intensive. So, but obviously what you could do is, obviously what we've done at ULesson is to constantly listen to the market, right? Listen to what is the issue. So for instance, this one thing to provide the content. There is another thing to be able to also listen and know what are the challenges, the barriers to adoption to EdTech, right? Sometimes it might not necessarily be out of not being open to innovation or new things. It could be things like I mentioned, other subsidiary things that will support adoption of EdTech. So we came up with things like, being able to provide content offline, right? And things like that. So I think that you have to just be able to listen to the market, keep on iterating and innovating. It's not sustainable, sincerely speaking, because obviously at the end of the day, you have salaries to pay, you have maintenance to run and all. It's not sustainable. But we are hoping that in the long run, the volume will cover for it, right? So it's just to keep on listening to the market, And that's why it's very important for us to get government involved in things like EdTech, right? Because when government provides the required enablements, things like grants and things like tax breaks and all, it also allows companies like ours to get a breather and be able to really innovate and not be worried overly on trying to make profit, in terms of, financial profit, but also be able to provide social profit and all. So I think it's just about listening to the market, a lot of consultation and collaboration, and just trying to innovate around the obvious realities we have even in our country as of today. I don't think that is the same issue for businesses like ours in other markets, right? But obviously our market is peculiar, and this is not just down to Nigeria; it's just down to the entire continent, right? The purchasing power is low, so averagely in a family, as much as we prioritize education, but people will have to like live and be alive before they pay for an extra EdTech product, right? So I'm paying for school fees, to pay for another subscription for my child to take classes online. It's a whole new thing altogether. So it's important that we also understand about the realities in the market and just be able to innovate around it and find ways. I know when we started off, being able to do content offline was not possible. So speaking to users and stakeholders, we saw that was like a really, really big blocker. So, I mean, that's what technology is there to do. Just keep on walking around obvious negative realities and obviously being able to find a way to get those products to the users that need them in a cost-effective way.
Thanks so much. And welcome, Sean. We saw that you dropped off there for a bit. Sean is a bit frozen. Sean, can you hear? Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. Okay, so Chidubem was just really answering the question of how do we kind of balance the impacts and profits making of the businesses of private sector. And he made a point there about being very much listening to the market and being aware of the sustenance and the realities of families. And I would love to use that point to shift gears here for a bit. And I want to ask you how important community involvement is in enhancing STEM education. That is, what roles can parents, can community leaders play in supporting STEM learning? I ask you this because I know you have or even before now, you have like a deep investment in communities. You have founded, you have led nonprofit as well that worked in deep partnership with communities, even in low-income areas. And so that's why I'm directing this question to you, Sharon, to see if you can share with us some insight regarding the involvement of communities in STEM education.
I think, and that's a very great question. I think most times when we talk about this, the beautiful part of STEM, we just leave out the community one way or the other, right? In ensuring that all of these things are, that STEM education is advanced, right? So I think that we need to bring the community into this. And as a Teach for Nigeria fellow back then, worked with these kids in low-income communities, and then it was a challenge to help these children master key concepts in literacy, because there was an extent to which their level of exposure reached, right? So I just want to paint a scenario. So I have a kid in my class whose mother sells local gin, in a very small store in front of her house. And then the father is the one who is drinking the gin and purchasing the Morning when this kid get up and wake up and go outside the house and preparing for school, is doing that all alone because she wants to collect the money for the school, and then I need to make sense. I need to make careers like being a doctor.
Sean,
For me,
you're breaking up. I don't know if it's me. Chidubem, are you experiencing the same thing of Sean cutting on and off? Yes.
Yeah.
So we're not getting the flow.
leave and join again if that will work.
Okay. Please do.
So sorry. Yeah.
As Sean, attends to his internet connection, we are almost at the end of our conversation. We have maybe 7 minutes left. And Chidubem, I wanted to quickly ask you, just in the same line of what Sean is responding to, I wonder what innovative methods you've used at ULesson to really get students, teachers, families interested in STEM subjects, or just trying to build that skill to fill in the skills gap in the country. Have you thought about that or created some innovative approach to doing that?
Yeah, so from our end, obviously, teachers and parents are quite key stakeholders. Like I mentioned earlier, that it's actually not ideal that we're having conversations about what kids in secondary school should be thinking about, what should be learning, right? It's actually the role of teachers and parents, to shape what kids should be doing at that point. That's my personal opinion. So what we've done at ULesson is we are big on communities, right? So we are big on making sure that we have teacher communities that we support with relevant materials that allow them to, be able to pass on STEM knowledge in class, learning tools and teaching tools and all. So we are building a healthy community of teachers who are, in our partner schools. So we're starting it with our partner schools, and we were hoping to scale, right? And for parents, obviously, at ULesson, we try to get parents, into it through regular updates and reports on learner engagements, right? So for most parents, right, the buy into EdTech products is actually out of passion to see their children do well. So there's an initial vigor to get them, to try new things or prepare my child for the future. But over time, that motivation wanes off if they don't see, profit in terms of, my child was B in maths, it's moved to A, right? So what we try to do is regular reporting to tell you that, your child has been using ULesson for the past 6 months. When he came into ULesson, this is where he was, and you can see that in so and so time he has been able to improve in this and that, and obviously they can see it in the classwork of their students, their words and all. So obviously, there's still a long way to go. But our idea is to build a community of, both parents and teachers who are committed to STEM education, who are committed to using technology for learning, and just being able to make sure that that community is vibrant by providing avenues for conversations to be heard, and also providing relevant materials that inform members of that community. And, just use them as, word of mouth marketing also for our business, obviously, so that they can be able to tell people within them. So I think that there is really see a lot of room for improvement in terms of getting teachers, especially, to embrace tech products. It's not something that is going to happen in one short time. It's going to be a process thing, re-education, and also making sure that they understand that tech is there to help them. I mean, generally, teachers have been afraid of, technology, and, with the advent of AI and what, ChatGPT and all is doing, everybody's so worried and scared. And, even people in the tech space are also worried, right? So everybody are just trying to understand where is this thing taking us to. But I think that it always happened in human history, right? At some point, we'll find our base, people will upskill, we'll just find how to do it. But I think that at the core, we will not be able to do without teachers in education. So it's just being able to reinforce that awareness in them and then prepare them to be able to use these tools to be able to achieve learning outcomes for learners. So, but our focus right now at ULESSON is actually on teachers, because we believe that if we can be able to get teachers to buy in on use of EdTech and all, for parents, they're actually there to see the end product, right? I want my child to be smarter. I want my child to pass his WAEC, for instance. That's the end product for a parent. They are not much interested at what the process might be, right? So that's what we are working on in ULESSON.
Thank you so much, Chidubem. I have lots of questions there that I don't think we can, answer. Questions such as, first, if the objective of the parents are very practical in terms of, what's like kind of progress that is, that they can measure, right? So a B to an A, passing marks from 60 to 70 kind of thing. And some of the things I'm thinking about is like one of some other things that is quite maybe difficult to measure, right? So maybe collaboration and, other soft skills.
Yeah. Obviously it's important, right? But obviously also being able to measure that or awareness of that depends on probably the exposure level of the parent in question, right? So for instance, if you are aware that people can take masters online remotely, right? And that there is a challenge with obviously learning to learn online is actually a learning practice on itself. There are people who are still struggling to be able to learn over the internet. So with things like that ability to learn online that kids start to pick up at an early age using EdTech, that prepares them for the future, right? We are seeing schools, even in Nigeria, universities, who are running remote programs, right? We don't know where if your child is in JS1, for instance, as much as we don't know what the EdTech education space is going to be in the next 15 years, when he's going to probably be in the university. The best you can do is to prepare him to be able to learn in whatever circumstance he finds himself. So some of these skills are not tangible enough to measure. So it depends on the exposure level of the parent in question. And if they are seeing their child from a holistic point of view, how self-aware is my child? How confident is my child using digital tools? I mentioned about digital literacy. So any parent who's not focusing on making their child to be digitally literate at this stage is probably shooting themselves in the foot, because we've seen people who are quite smart and lettered, but because they are not digitally aware, they have lost opportunities. So that's one of the unmeasured advantages of playing with EdTech products, especially for kids in primary and secondary school. It makes them aware of the possibilities. For instance, we have a product on ULESSON where kids can play games, quiz teasers with people from all across Africa. Imagine your child doing a math quiz with somebody from Kenya, right? A child who probably doesn't know where Kenya is on the map, right? But that kind of opens their mind to the possibilities of that we are in a global village, and I'm not just competing with the Tolu or the Ebuka in my class. I'm competing with everybody in the world. So I have to put in my best, because national boundaries are now blurred, because opportunities can be competed for from anywhere in the world. So I think that the re-education has to happen holistically for both parents and teachers, just so to know that technology is not there to steal anything away from anybody, just preparing these children for the eventuality of the future they will live in. So it's either you prepare them or you leave them disadvantaged.
Thank you so much, Chidubem. And I think the comment on AI and the kind of the mindset that often comes from a lot of people, whether teachers or even industry people as well, that's a whole lot of conversation. Maybe TEP can create another webinar for us to discuss that. But I would love to, Sharon, I would love to give you a chance. We have very 3 minutes left, right? But I would love to give you a chance to share your thoughts on involvement of community. If you can give something really quick in a minute, that would be great.
Thank you. Can you hear me now? Is it better? Okay. All right, Jen. Sorry, I think the internet was really just misbehaving the other time. So I would say, of course, very quickly, I think involvement of community is key, and involvement of community at the level of parents, and then of course the whole community as well. And that's because, I mean, we still have some stereotypes that are attached to, professions that we choose to, engage in. For instance, if you have a lady, I mean, when you go to many of the universities today, when you enter into an engineering classroom, you would find it challenging to see a woman or a lady in that class. Maybe 3 or 4 or 5 ladies in a class of about 50 students. And that's because there is a stereotype that we have that only the males or only the guys should actually be doing STEM related activities and profession, which is a myth that we all need to debunk. And of course, this kind of myth can only be debunked at the community level, right? So how can the community begin to see professions as inclusive? How can they begin to see activities as inclusive, especially with the way things are actually evolving these days? And also at the parental level as well, there's a part where you ask like a parent, a typical parent, or what do you want your daughter or your child to be? And they tell you, oh, my child should be an accountant, or my child should be a doctor, or my child should be an engineer. And because of that, they've been able to box their children, not to be able to look beyond or outside the box and begin to think of other professions that exist today. I think there has to be a mass reorientation of parents about the current professions that exist today and how their children can be a part of these professions, and how not to belittle any direction that their child actually choose to go in. A lot of parents today don't know what a back-end engineer is. They don't know who a software developer is. They don't know who a product designer is, right? So these are like new skills and new areas that are becoming frontiers today. And how can we educate parents on these new frontiers so that when their child comes home and tell them, based on this and this is who I want to be, they are able to support that child still, even if it doesn't go with what they really understand or think about. So I think that area, community level, the parental, and then is very, very key to the advancement of STEM. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sean, and thank you, Chidubem. This has been a really insightful conversation. It definitely has shifted a lot of the thinking and my perspective around STEM education. And if I'm leaving this conversation with anything, it's the importance of actually attaining a shared vision for STEM, not just within sciences, but also beyond sciences with every subject across entire schools. And the importance of building that shared vision, not just within government or within the private sector, but everyone coming together as Grace said, an intergenerational and multi-sectoral vision that cross across the entire system, including our local communities as well. Thanks again, Chidubem, and thanks again, Oluwaseun, for the amazing conversation. Really, really appreciate you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much for that brilliant moderation, Henry. It was such an invigorating and brilliant panel discussion. And I really liked how our both speakers were able to, touch down on the importance of public-private partnership, which I believe is really, really important. So thank you so much for, taking out time to share your perspective on this topic. And to all our participants who joined in and were really, really engaging, thank you so, so much. And so, yes, we've come to the end of today's session, and I'm just going to drop in some links in the chat box. You can learn more about our work and our upcoming events if you follow us on LinkedIn at TEP Center and Twitter at TEP Center, as well as Instagram at TEP Center. So we also have a community of practice, which is Nice Community. So you can subscribe to that mailing list. The link is in the chat box as well. Thank you so much. See you the same time next month. Bye.